Welcome to the Franchise Frontier, the podcast where we explore the evolving franchise landscape, dive into latest industry trends, and share actionable tools and tactics to help you build and grow your business.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Franchise Frontier podcast. Here we explore the world of business ownership, unlocking keys to success and uncovering common pitfalls. Today, we are stoked to have Michelle Blomberg from Advantage Software and Solutions. I'll just put that out there. Michelle comes to us from, and it's just a little different. It's not necessarily in the franchise world that we're used to. However, it leans heavily in on business ownership. So we're excited to have her on the show.
Thank you. Yep. Glad to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about Advantage. Obviously, this business started out in rural Iowa. Something that your dad was into or became part of, and then it has gone through many steps to get to where it is now. So, when you think about how business started, your story in Albert City, Iowa, those type of things, one of 10 kids, is that correct?
That's right. Yep.
So what was business like around the dinner table in that scenario?
What's fun about that part of the story is, so our mom and dad, imagine having 10 kids around the table. My father was an accountant at what was in Iowa is called a hog refinery. And my mom was several things besides a mom and a housewife and all the other. She did lots of odd jobs. But one day, my dad came to my mom and said, there's this company in town that wants to test anybody who wants to go get tested to see how good they are at math. And I went and took the test, and I got the highest that they've seen so far.
His math was mathin'.
Mm-hmm. And my mom's like, who's this company? And they're like, it's IBM. And my mom says, who's IBM? And so they didn't know who it was. And so then they said, well, they want to. So my mom, it's like, what? So, and he says, well, they want to send me to school to learn how to be a computer programmer. Because my dad, at the time there weren't computers, like nobody knew what they were and whatever. So he goes to Chicago for 3 weeks, leaves my mom with the 10 kids at home, goes to Chicago, learns how to be a computer programmer, comes home for a week, goes to Minneapolis for 3 more weeks, and then comes home, and voila, he's a computer programmer. So the agriculture co-op in our town then hired my dad as the first computer programmer to write computer software for agriculture. So he started IBM, then came into that company, and they sold this cooperative a giant computer system, like it would take up this entire room. And that's where my dad started. So he wrote the first accounts payable computer system for the co-op in our town. And then kind of that's where the story started beyond that. So, a lot of kids around the table, I'm sure my mom was like, well, also we have these mouths to feed. So how are we going to do that if you're off doing this new thing? Like, I'm sure it was super scary. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a ton of context in there that's pretty funny. It's amazing to think that you can become a computer programmer in 6 weeks.
In 6 weeks.
Right.
Voila.
But at the same time, I can imagine computers were a little different then, right?
Yeah.
I played the Oregon Trail. I could probably program that right on my cell phone.
That's hilarious.
But I think that it's interesting to know that obviously your dad had a unique skill set that they, at that time, knew how to look for and to kind of grow into what it was. And so when your dad started to work at that business, he did not have his own business yet. He was working for that company, right? Doing a computer program.
Yeah.
And so can you touch on briefly, like, just what that program was for? Like, what did they need?
Yeah. So then it started as accounting, and then in agriculture, very specific to agriculture, is called grain accounting, which in other words is when a farmer brings grain into the co-op to sell it to them, they need software to be able to track it, measure its like moisture and but all the stuff that comes, foreign material, it's called, that comes in a load of grain, all of that, so that the farmer can then get paid for his grain. And then the co-op takes all the grain from all the farmers and sells it off on the Board of Trade. They're called a cooperative because the farmers are the owners. So then part of a computer system is tracking that too, called patronage. So now a farmer owns a piece of stock in the co-op. They get paid at the end of the year based on how well the business does, how well the co-op does. They get a check of patronage of what they've done for the year. So the computer system had to track that also. So those are kind of the three things back then. It was accounting, grain accounting, tracking that part, and then this patronage piece were the three that my dad had at the time. Then I won't go deep into what happened, but he had a falling out with the CEO of the co-op and walked away down the street, main street of our little tiny town of 680 people, and started his own business.
I was just going to ask that.
But he didn't, yeah, but he didn't have a computer because, like I said, it was this giant expensive thing that took up this room. So this guy that he had the falling out with, the CEO, he needed my dad because he was, back then there was like no other people that could do what he did.
Right.
And my dad needed a computer. So they came up with this deal where my dad would support their computer system for them if he could use the computer to start his own business and take all the software he had written and start his own business from that. So that's how the start of my parents starting their own business, which was called Be Rich. My dad's name was Rich and my mom's name was Betty. So it was like the BE of her.
Hey, but it's also, if you're going to start a business,
yeah, you got to bring in the wife.
I want to be rich.
Yeah,
right?
Yep.
And you got to bring in the wife.
Our song that we would sing.
You know, when we talk to even possible franchise owners, you know, there's oftentimes we have conversations and we just try to ask, you know, is this a family decision? Is, you know, and then oftentimes people will say, no, it's just, you know, I'll make the decision, and we laugh.
Yeah.
We shake our heads and we go, okay, well, here's an email for your wife as well, or your husband, either one that might be.
Sure.
And so there's always a part of that, but you kind of lend into it and you answered it already, but I was going to ask, you know, if there was a defining moment that said, you know, okay, you know what, I'm going to do this on my own. So I think oftentimes, you know, you run into situations where, you probably wouldn't have done it on your own, but that little falling out probably, lent itself to a good scenario.
There wasn't a lot of co-ops that had computer systems. So then he could go into the next co-op and say, like, this is what I did at this co-op, and then sit there and write it specific for them. So it was a very specialized as he grew, you know, so then the next one and then the next one. That's how the software grew into more than just those three components that I talked about. It grew into, then from there, the rest of agriculture is like the agronomy piece, which is like taking care of the field before you plant the crops.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the portion that's, which is super interesting, is like the farm. How do you heat the barns that the animals are in, or how do you run your machines? That is all run on like diesel fuel and propane. And so we wrote software to track all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So so as time goes on, it gets very specific into the agriculture piece of it. So then at the point when I bought the business from my parents, I mean, I know we're rushing to the next question, but one thing that wasn't there when I bought it and became a thing right at like 2000 was the ability for a farmer to be able to access their information. And when I would tell my dad that, like, Dad, we're writing some new software now that allows a farmer to hop on their computer and look at where all their grain is and look at their account information and et cetera. I mean, he had no concept. He was like, what? They can, you know, so it was
what does
fun.
That mean?
It was fun to, like, once I kind of had all of his components moving forward, then adding to that more technologies as time went on.
Not to steal a good term, but makes it very granular. No pun intended, right?
Yes.
So let's rewind back a little bit more, right? So we've kind of got an overview of the business, kind of growing up. Talk about your path a little bit. You know, obviously you didn't
Yeah.
sit at the table with 10 kids and go,
No.
oh, I'm going to buy the business. So just so you guys know, I got dibs. And someone else is like, I'm going to go play ball. And you're like, no, no, no. So talk about kind of your path, even, going through college, that type of stuff, thoughts that you had on that maybe some of your brothers and sisters or even your family had on you that kind of lent you to a path of where you thought you might want to go.
Yeah.
Maybe you wanted to be a teacher, a movie star, whatever that might be, kind of that path you took, and just kind of bring us full circle in on your background.
That part is a really fun story also, because my dad then, when I was in high school, some of my siblings were already in college. So then when I came along, computers were now just starting to become a thing. And he was like, I want to be a math teacher. That's all I ever wanted to be. And I said that, and a coach. And I was like, Dad, I'm not going into computers. And he's like, you have to, like, it's the future. And he would, impress that on me. And I'm like, no, thanks. I just want to be a math teacher. I just want to be a coach. That's my dream. And you can have your own dream, right? So then I went
Dad
to
said,
college.
well, you better figure out this game called Number Munchers because it's going to be big in math.
So I went on and played college basketball and played college softball. So I got my college. One of the things with 10 kids is you kind of had to find your own your way to the next path after high school. Like, our parents didn't really have any money to give us to figure it out. So you kind of had to figure your own path out. So my path ended up taking me to Wayne State in Nebraska, where I was able to play basketball and softball and able to have my college paid for. So it was super amazing because, for one thing, we weren't a very good basketball team when I got there. Like, I think our record was like 3-21. And I played Iowa basketball. So I don't know if you know that, but when I grew up, all the way from kindergarten, my sisters too, all the way from kindergarten to my senior year, we played 6-on-6 Iowa basketball. Only state left in the country that
When
did.
you played 6-on-6, you could do that at the dinner table almost, correct? If you had your parents.
We did in the driveway,
okay,
definitely.
Fair enough. Continue.
And so we, in the game of Iowa girls basketball, you only could go to half court. So I played offense 3-on-3 against the other team's defense. You also only got 2 dribbles. You also got to take 2 full steps after you picked the ball up. So you played down on this.
This is the wildest thing I've ever heard.
Yep. I know most people have never heard of it. And I
have to do a different episode on this, on just basketball. This is incredible.
So sometimes when I tell a little bit of this story, I ask people to, like, raise your hand if you've ever heard of this. In a crowd of 200, you'll get like 10 hands. So it was only Iowa and it was only women way before that, like in our mom's time. A lot of other states played this way. But in the case of when I was growing up and my sisters, just us, Iowa was it. So, and why they kept it is because the state tournament, which is in Des Moines, would sell out. Like, this year at the state tournament, that would sell out by the very next day for next year's state tournament. It was like people came from all over the country just to see this weird, unusual game. But anyway, so that's what I played. And again, small town Iowa, I didn't really recognize that the rest of the world didn't do the same thing. You just kind of thought everybody did that.
Right.
So now when it was time to go to college and play basketball, I had a lot to learn. And so I had to learn how to play defense because I never played it. I only played offense. I had to learn how to dribble because you only got 2 dribbles. And I had to learn how to, most importantly, not travel. Because when I went to Wayne State and I was now the starting point guard, I think I traveled like 18 times in my first game. Like the whistle, like every time I touched the ball, like, whoop, and I'm like, oh, I can't not travel.
Right. Interesting.
So I played it. So our first year, I got lucky. My assistant coach took me under his wing and really worked with me really well all my years. And so then by the time I was a junior, then we ended up being like 8 and whatever, 17. But by the time I should say my junior and senior year, both of those years, like my senior year, we ended up almost making it to nationals. We were like a hard loss at the end. So we were 21-3, I think, by the time I got to be a senior. What it taught me, sports in general, and all my siblings, we all played 4 or 5 sports in high school, and we all, some of us went on to play in college and stuff. It teaches you a lot about teamwork, also with 10 siblings, or 9 siblings, but 10 kids. but sports in general teaches you so much about, you don't know it at the time, but it teaches you a ton about leadership. And like, especially as the point guard of the basketball team, I felt like that's where I learned a lot related to becoming a leader and leading my team to turning the team around after, like a pretty terrible freshman season. So I feel like that is a really pinnacle part of my career. Continually, I became a math teacher, and my dad continually kept saying, go into computers. And I was like, no, thanks. But when I got a math degree, you had to take computer classes at the time, like different from your generation. We had to go to this lab and rent a computer for the half hour of these like giant ones, and you got your half hour to kind of do your thing.
I didn't rent, but I also had a computer lab.
You did?
I did.
Okay.
Yep.
I guess I younged you down.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
And so, I ended up getting a minor in computer science just because you were required to take these classes in a math major. And I ended up getting a minor in coaching and also in physical education. So here now I graduated from college. I just got done doing my student teaching in Pierce, Nebraska, and they offered me a teaching job in coaching. But also my assistant basketball coach was moving to Minnesota, and he said, there's a company, I want you to come be my assistant coach at a college, but there's a company there that's tied to the college, and they are looking for math people, but you'd be a computer programmer. And so I interviewed for both jobs, and then I was like, well, how much did they pay? And the teaching job was $14,000, and the computer programming job was $24,000. So I chose the money.
Yeah.
And I let my dad win the battle. So he won that one, and I became a programmer for those are my first 4 years of my career, coached at this college with my other coach. And then that kind of like moved me in that direction a little bit. But deep in my heart, there was still like, I want to try teaching. So I went and got my Minnesota teaching license, and then I ended up leaving the computer programming job, teaching math for 3 years. And that's when my parents were ready to retire, and they kind of came to us kids and like, we're going to retire. Anybody want to buy the business? I always say I felt like they all stepped back and I was the only one left standing.
Right.
But that's not really the truth. The truth is, they'd all like started having families and were very established in their, having kids. I never had kids, so I never had to like make a decision on how to feed a kid versus my own, career path. So I ended up moving back to my hometown from Minnesota, and did not move in with my parents because I had to like draw the line there. But I lived in a little house up the street and learned the business from my parents for a year. And then that's when it was mine, and I moved it back to Minnesota and had a year of that, just 2 employees total. When I got there, the Y2K kind of popped up, and my customers were like, we had about 25 customers at the time. Michelle, what are you going to do about the Y2K? And I'm like, I don't know what that is. So let me call my dad. And so I called Dad, and I was like, what's a Y2K? And he said, told me.
Yeah.
And he said, unfortunately, truthfully, when I wrote the software, I really only put in 2 digits in the date field because hard drives and disk space was so valuable when he wrote the system, whereas today it's like nothing. You don't even care about it anymore.
Your phone has more data
than this giant machine.
Yeah, exactly.
And he did truly. So it was going to take a full like rewrite. And I go, so how much is that? Because I have $6,000 in the bank. And he's like, it's like $500,000 to rewrite it, to get it to there. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So what's another path we can choose? So we went a different path.
And so that's interesting, because I think that oftentimes, people that are looking into business now, they don't have to think about something like that. I shouldn't say it that way, because we think the same way about when the pandemic came. We didn't think that we were going to have to worry about it. But
yeah, for sure.
You think back to things that are somewhat out of your control.
Yeah.
And the last thing your dad thought about when he was going to buy or build a program was Y2K.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. He said that too. He's like, I never once thought about the year 2000. because it
Right.
was like in the 1980s, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, it's impressive. So when you think about that and you think back to basically the reinvention, so don't talk about it in terms of, what you had to do, but
yeah,
talk about the thought process a little bit in, okay, now I'm the owner of this company.
yeah,
No one knows what Y2K is, but we need to go into a different path. And you said you had 2 employees.
hmm
So you're basically having conversations with yourself
yeah,
about the path moving forward
yeah,
and trying to imagine where the business is going to go.
yeah.
So just talk briefly about kind of that thought process and stepping back and going, okay, what's the future look like for this company?
And I feel like for me, and this is just me, a lot of my decisions like that, looking back on them, they were super pinnacle moments, like you're describing, Dave. But when I look back at it, I felt like it was almost like lucky because when I approached this, was thinking about this, like, what am I going to do? Like, we can't move forward. And then all of a sudden, one of the 2 employees went to a IBM event and met a guy that he used to know. And that guy was like, hey, our CEO would be interested in like you and your business to merge them together. And at the time, mergers weren't really even ever in my mind. But I was like, well, what does that look like? And so he brings it back to me. And so I go down to Rochester, Minnesota, had my parents come with me because I was like, I don't know what's going on here, kind of. And so we ended up talking, and what they wanted was me and my 25 customers. What I wanted was their Y2K software already converted.
Right.
And so the merger, I, asked my parents. And so we decided that we were going to do this and that I would go in as a VP of technology and the CEO of the company, he stayed. So that was the decision, moved on, moved forward. And we're right at the year 2000. And those 3 years in between that, our philosophies, my philosophy that I learned from my parents and his philosophy that he learned from wherever were like oil and water. And so his method of leadership was the opposite of mine. And so that was another challenge to kind of figure out is how am I going to represent this new company now that I brought my customers into? How am I going to lead it with the me and not with the guy who's the CEO? So there was several kind of pieces in that were challenging, really, really challenging. But then like I said a little bit ago, sometimes I feel like things just happen. He had a heart attack and died. And what happened from that point, I'm not saying like I wish that on him, so don't think I'm a bad person, Dave,
I
but
won't say that.
but he had a heart attack and died. And what happened next was all the customers, all this stuff started happening. Like for one thing, a lot of bad stuff, like bills he hadn't paid and
The
things.
problems rise to the top.
Yeah, real fast. So those were all coming at us like every day, bam, bam, bam. The other was the ownership of the company. Like, how do we figure that out? And his wife was alive and he owned 51% of the company. So we put all of the other 5 owners of us, put our money together and figured out a way to buy her
Yep.
out. Now, that was a real come to Jesus meeting, though, because it's like, do we really want to own this business that feels like a sinking ship right now?
Right.
Or do we want to actually do this, which is going to require a lot of change?
Yeah, you bring up a good point that I think is important to kind of understand that even when things are quote unquote perfect,
Yeah.
there's always things going on as a business owner, whether you're
Yeah.
51, 49, whatever percent it is, there's
Yeah.
a lot of things. And
Yeah.
oftentimes there's businesses that we think are running just perfect.
Perfectly.
And then something happens and all
Yeah.
of these things rise to the top. And I think it's important to know that, when people buy a business or they get into business, like business is fun, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
And so there's, I mentioned this on a podcast I just did when you talk about business ownership, and I stole this from somebody, business ownership and just working a W-2. A W-2 is like living in the zoo. And business ownership is like living in the jungle. Some people are made for the jungle and some people are made for the zoo.
That's a really good
I mean,
analogy.
if you live in the jungle, you get the freedom of the jungle, but you also have to, in order to eat, you got to kill something.
Yeah.
If you live in the zoo, you got to walk
Some-
around. If it rains, I go into my cage and they're going to feed me at 2 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and 4 o'clock.
Yeah,
So I think it's important.
that's awesome.
And then another thing that you touched on.
I'm stealing that. by
Okay,
the
you
way.
can have it. Another thing that you touched on that is it's almost hard to understand is, for example, you talked about you had one of your employees went to an IBM meeting, right?
Mhm.
Just the thought
Yeah.
that you had to go to a meeting to meet people, like it wasn't like a
Yeah.
phone call.
Yeah.
It wasn't a Zoom call, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't anything like that. Oh, my employee went to this meeting. He met with this guy. He brought it back to me. I took my parents. We went to, it's
Yeah.
like those
All
things.
physically you're going places.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that, there's a good part of that too, because it's almost the one thing we're missing in business and in life is interpersonal communication, right?
Yeah.
We don't talk to people anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see how, and this other company, this other gentleman,
Mhm.
he found value in you and 25 customers.
Yeah.
That seems minuscule
Yep.
on the grand scheme of
Exactly.
things, but you're going to have to do things in order to push your business.
And growth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so here you are. This gentleman has passed away. You and the other 4 or 5 owners have
Yep.
decided, okay, we're going to buy this person out.
Mhm.
And so I would imagine even that breakdown is questionable because it's like, okay, the 4 of us now own it.
Yeah.
Who owns what? Who's running what?
Yeah. And because it was so dysfunctional at the time that he passed away, 3 of the 5 people worked under him before that. One was towards the end, but the other 3 for almost the entire length of the 20 years had been working for him. So along comes me, who's 180 degrees different,
Mhm.
and having to learn a new culture. First to pick me as the CEO, because I was still only like there for whatever 3 years, to have me be the CEO in a pretty male dominated industry. Agriculture just is like today, even today, 2025, of all my customers in the country, there's one co-op out of say 500 or 600 that we have, one that has a woman CEO. So it's still very much male, which is, I personally like that because I get along really well with men and women, but it's just been the way it is. So think about 25 years ago that they decided that a woman should be the CEO of a tech, not just agriculture related to what I just said, but also a tech company is super unusual back then. So we did because we just needed something to be different. Because the way it was not going in the right direction when he had passed away. So it was like something has to change. And so when I became the CEO, a lot of my old coaching and teaching all started to come out really quickly. For example, the very first meeting that I had with the employees was, okay, because our company now was made up of about 20-ish people. And of the 20, say 8 were computer programmers and the other 12 were phone support, like you were talking earlier, like phone support and taking care of customers and helping them with problems. And they could have been oil and water. And everybody just worked in their own little like silo. So there was no teamwork. There was no togetherness. There was no bouncing ideas off of each other. That's what I took over when I took over the business. So the word culture didn't really describe what happened then. Today it does. Like a full entire change of culture. Back then it was just more like me saying like, okay, everything is wrong. Everything here is wrong. So the first thing that I did was I bought the other 4 owners because there was also, like you just said, like the 5 of us figuring each other out and that we're going to be own a business together. That's a lot, like figuring out how to have 5 people continually own this with me being the CEO, the normal CFO, like the roles. And I bought this book by Marcus Buckingham. It's just called Now Discover Your Strengths. It actually is based out of Omaha. This guy is through the Gallup, where Gallup is out by the airport. I'd never heard of it, but somebody recommended it, so I read it. And you kind of, after the first 2 chapters, you take this test, and it's an online test, and it's like whatever 32 minutes long, and pops out your top 5 strengths
Mhm.
out of the total of 32 or something. And I liked it, and then the rest of the book kind of talks about it. So I had them take it, and then I was like, meet me at this bar and bring your top 5 strengths. And that's how the first meeting started, of them needing to like learn new ways of talking, learning how to look at people differently than just, I'm going to do everything myself. Like that's how the company was prior to that. And also not very good service. Like our customers would wait weeks before they would get a phone call, and our software was not progressing, and et cetera. So that was the first thing. But then the next step that I did was like pulled the whole company together. And I felt like I've told this story another time, where I felt like Moses, because when I walked into this what I call now all staff meeting, here was like all the computer programmers over here in their like little pod, and here was all the support people over here in their pod, and there was nothing.
Camaraderie.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I gave this assignment where I was like, what's your favorite part of your job? That's it. Take your favorite part, you two, and meet together. And by the next all staff, we want you to talk about each other. And I paired them up and then brought that back. Then the next one was, what's your least favorite? And then we on and on and on. So today I'm known as like, now I make them do like all kinds of team building, all kinds of skits, all kinds of like weird off the wall stuff that they're required to kind of connect with each other. And it was the pinnacle point of the change. So they were starting to get to know me as what kind of leader I'm going to be. And, genuinely a person who's like, what is your character? Like, we need to know who you are. And that becomes, in my opinion, like the base of all of it. Like the whole company now, 25 years later, everything is built on genuine character, like honesty and respect, and how you talk to people and how you treat people, all of it. Like and it has worked for us. Like we have never been more successful than we are today. I don't have a like magic formula on why there's financial success, other than to say, I feel like I'm a person that when you do everything right with your people and treat your customers the right way, the money comes with it.
And so would you say, I mean, first off, that's awesome. And I think that there's a lot of value in that for people that are interested in business ownership. We're going to go back and just use that word culture, like you talked about.
Yeah.
It sounds just in your business that it's so important to have an identity of who we are as a business, not only who you are as a person. We at Horsepower, we use traction is called.
Okay.
And it really defines people that are visionaries from integrators and how they work together and those type of things. But you're right. We've taken a multitude of those tests, and
It's tricky to figure out what you just said, though. It's tricky to figure out what drives a person, like what drives this individual from being a worker bee versus the leader bee, right?
Right.
Like it is tricky. You're right, Dave. That's a good way to analyze.
And so I think that when you realize that, though, and you put people, we always talk about it in terms of right people, right seat. And so it doesn't mean that anyone's a less of a value to the company, but maybe they're not in the right seat. Maybe we thought that we saw them in this vision, but the more we look at their, what excites them about business or even their job, they maybe are better over here, or vice versa. And so I think that it's interesting to hear you say that, because, you have a company at that time that, all the cream, we'll call it, is rising to the top, and you're going, okay, look at all these bills, look at all these negative things.
Yeah.
But while those things are going to have to be dealt with to run the business, you as the CEO were able to say, okay, we'll get through all that. But once we do, we have to figure out where we're going. And the only way we're going to go that direction is together with everybody. And so you had to back build a company that when you partnered with, you were going, oh, they want me, I want them. It's great.
Yeah.
And it wasn't great.
Yeah.
And so fast forward now, you've been there. How long have you,
This
hold on one second. Let me cut you off really for one quick second. At that moment, is that when it finally felt like this is my company?
So 5 years into me taking over, I could feel the momentum. I could feel a change. I could feel all of it. But more importantly, so could my customers and so could my employees. They could feel it. Like some of the employees, to get them to change, it's like kicking and screaming to get them to change their habits. But our customers, so then I got invited 5 years into this, me being the CEO, to go speak at a event for CHS, which is big agriculture business up in the Minnesota, Wisconsin. And so it was 200 across the states, 200 leaders from the ag businesses. We're all going to be in one room, and their head of that group, the head of the board president, he said, Michelle, we want you to come speak. And I was like, wait, what? Why? Why would you pick me? Like, I don't know what I should say. And he said, everybody wants to know what you did to turn this company around. And he said, so many of us that are your customers in the room, we had one foot out the door already. We were like, we got it. When the previous CEO died and you took over, we were all like, there's no way they're going to turn this around. So turns out we did turn it around through those like 4 and 5 years. And in my opinion, it does, when you have a 20-year culture, to turn that around does take a lot of time too. It's not just like magically here's a new CEO and everything's going to change. So I spoke to this group, and it was really interesting because my mom was still alive. And I said, Mom, this group of people, they're asking me to speak. Like, I've never spoken to, that level. I've spoken to at my own conferences and my own employees, but never to like outside of that. I'm like, what should I talk about? And she's like, Michelle, tell that story of when I was in high school, I missed a layup that stopped our team from going to the state tournament. And it was like the end of the game. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And she said, everybody wants to hear about life stories and not just all successes. Also things that didn't go the right way, because that's what you're learning from. Like, this was my mom who, like I said earlier, was sitting in the back shadows of my dad. Everybody was like, oh, Rich Blomberg, this business. Here sits my mom, and she's the one that gave me this advice. So I was like, I hadn't thought about it for 10 years either, this story, this missed layup. And so I talk for a while through, like, I almost don't even remember the first like 30 minutes, because I was just so nervous to stand in this room and it was 200 men, and they were all CEOs of companies. And I was like, felt like just a tiny little puppy, not really even, shouldn't even be in this room. So I was talking, and I get all the way to the end, and I said, so one last kind of story. And so I tell the story about this missed layup. And it was pin drop, first of all, but also like some of the men were crying in the room. And I'm
Missing
like,
a lip, sad.
well, yeah, because the way it happened too, like, I don't need to tell it on the podcast.
Right.
We can save that for a future podcast.
We'll say that for the 6-on-6 basketball podcast.
Okay, sounds good. But these people, I mean, they were like emotional. And so it really was, so I get all done, and I've, I think I had 45 minutes, and I go, any questions? And I mean, it was like, all these hands went up, and I was like, oh, okay. Ed. And so this guy, Ed, was one of my customers. He stands up and he's like, first of all, I want to tell you, like, I was one of the people that was looking to leave like 3 years ago. And he was one of my big customers. He's like, we were already looking, Michelle. And he's like, and now we're not. And he just like said it like that. And the whole room was like, whoa, because he, carried a lot of
Yeah.
clout. And I'm like, thank you, Ed. That's awesome. And also thank you for not leaving. But I also said, like, did you have any questions? And he said, yeah, I have a question, Michelle. And again, remember, this is now like 2004. Um, and the room was full of men. We really struggle with women in the workforce, he said. And I go, oh, okay. And he's like, so it causes a lot of conflicts, Michelle. And I'm like, women in the workforce causes a lot of conflicts, Ed. And he's like, yeah. So how do you handle that? And he just said it so like blanketly and generic. And I said, well, the way I would like to answer it, Ed, is this weekend at the Mall of America in Minneapolis is a quilting conference. All women. You go watch them. They all are getting along perfectly. So women know how to get along with other people, if that's what you're wondering. It comes back to leadership. So in my company, I said, of course, turning the culture around and turning this company around, we've had several conflicts because you can't, ignore them. And one was with one man and one woman, and they couldn't get along. So I brought them into the room together, closed the door, and said, what's going on? Like, you tell me first to the guy, why do you have this feeling towards her? What's going on here? And vice versa. I said, and I could tell it wasn't like they weren't on the same page. And so then I said, well, um, we're not leaving this room until this is resolved. So I don't care if I have to pull cots into this room and we're going to sleep here all night because we're not leaving. Okay. And so then they were just like this. And I go, so, John, do you actually want this to be resolved with Dawn? And he said, not really. And I was just like, okay. Well, she was crying, like, how come he doesn't like me and all the
Right.
things, right? So you had all of it. And I was like, well, at least now we know how you feel and how you feel. So to me, what I said to Ed is like, I'm not giving you the answer. What I'm telling you is like, a lot of things can be resolved by just bringing two people into a room together. Because what most people don't like to do is say to someone's face, this is why I don't like you. This is why I'm mad at you. This is why I have a conflict with you. Most people like to say it behind their backs.
Right.
Once people know that you're Michelle Blomberg's style, if you have a conflict, you're going to be in her office and you're going to be talking to the person you have the conflict with. People get so afraid of the actual act of having to face the person that they're having a conflict with that conflicts stop. And so, or get talked about. Like, it's really important to me. That's a firm thing that I kind of built the company on, because today, now here we are 20 years later, and they it doesn't happen. And if I hear anybody who's like, well, so and so did this thing, I'm like, well, let's get him and bring him in here. They're like, no, 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 it's fine. I didn't mean to say that. I'll go talk to Michelle. So conflict resolution through all companies, it's always going to be there, right? So you can't just say, well, we don't have any. Like, everybody has conflicts because we're human beings. But figuring out how to manage it, lead through it, allowing people to have difference of opinions is super important, that people are able to not just agree with everything going on around them, right? You want that. You want some level of conflict, but it doesn't mean that it has to get disrespectful. So that's kind of, for me, that's sort of a core of what I've built the company on, is like being able to talk about conflicts but keeping it respectful, allowing differences are okay, kind of all of that. So,
And so obviously the business has thrived. It's come a long way since Y2K,
yeah.
we'll say. Um, you know, you still are 100% employee owned
Yeah.
and the only one in the space.
Yeah.
Why has that been so, not pivotal for you, but maybe just something that you felt passionate about?
Yeah. Because there was a time when, not just a time, many, many times every month, that I get people asking if they can buy our company, like at least 10 a month, of more like financial institutions looking to
Private
buy us.
equity.
Yep. And so then I am like, no thanks. But there was a time about maybe 10, 12 years ago where one of our competitors came to us and said, let's put our companies together. And so we kind of went a little ways down that path. And when we got to the ownership part, um, their owner was a person up in Canada. And so I was like, well, our ownership we're employee owned. We own it. And they said, well, go talk to him. His name was Bruce. So I flew up to Canada, met with him, and it kind of went okay. I was like, okay. So kind of went down that path a little bit until the part where he started talking about eliminating positions. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it no matter what. And so I went home and I talked to my dad and mom and talked with people around me. And then a week later, he sent a proposal for what it would take to buy it. And I said, hey, Bruce, no, thank you. And then he's like, well, tell me what it is, what it
What's
would
the
need.
number?
Yeah. And
And
I'm
it's
like,
not a number.
there isn't a number. And so then that was, roughly a little more than 10 years ago. And I've sort of, now that's become my line
Yeah.
is like even my customers are like, well, there has to be a number, Michelle. And I'm like, there is no number. And I'm a person who I make good money. My employees make good money. Our customers are very happy. And there is no amount of money that is going to make me happier. Like I'm about as happy as I can be with what I've created. So I don't need more money and I don't plan on selling the business. And my employees know that too. And now today, in the last, it's really been about the last 5 or 6 years, we are not just fully employee owned, but out of the 50 employees, 47 own the company. So they all, when they can, like if they can afford it, or when they just are offered, because right now we're out of stock, but when they're offered stock, they're all like, yes. And we have to put their names in a bucket and like figure out who gets to buy stock in the company. So they love it. They love to be able to say, I'm an owner of a business. They love to be able to like, my job is here, but also at the end of the year, if we make money, I make a little more money.
Yeah.
And so it's really amazing to know that we've went through, I could have probably gotten a few $1,000,000 way back then if we would have sold the business, but then what? Then what happens the very next day? And that message was super clear from my dad and his old crony buddies when I would go like hang out with my dad then later in his life. And he'd be sitting around with these old guys and drinking coffee. And they were all like, they all had their story. So I like listened to their story. And then they would all like unanimously never sell your business, Michelle. They're like,
Interesting.
because the very next day, you got to still have a job and you got to answer to your employees. So I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it. And even when some of my competitors are like, yeah, you should, Michelle, this company they bought us and it's awesome. And they'll tell me all these things. And I'm like, that's fantastic. Like, I never want it to sound negative because it is what it is.
It's just not for you.
What works for us is that we are fully employee owned and someday when there's no Michelle, the next CEO gets to decide what they want to do.
I think
and that's just what it is.
There's a lot to be said for that too, in terms of, there's just, I would imagine, a different feel as an employee when you know that you have some ownership stake in the business.
Yeah.
I just think that there's a lot to be said. And I know that, I'm sure it was at this point, it's probably more than a few million that you could get from private equity. But to your point, you have done a very good job of, while being the owner of the company and the CEO of the company, you have taken a leadership role in which you still are very mindful of the company and the people that work for you.
Yeah.
So you've grown from, and I don't know if you've ever been over 50 employees, but you've been
Just a little, but mostly right around there. Yeah.
And so are you still basically made up of, or is there a good amount of computer programmers and those type of things as well?
Yeah. Like a third are developers, software developers, and then the other 2/3, mainly, there's a couple side things, but are mainly phone support. But what's neat about our company is doing phone support for your entire job basically sucks.
Yeah.
And nobody lasts very long in that.
Right.
It's like all you're doing all day long is listening to people's problems and trying to help them solve them. But usually they're not very happy, right? So we figured that out about 8 or 9 years ago, that the people that are doing this job, they have so much more to offer our company. So now today, they are the ones that are talking to our customers. So they're designing new software. So we write new software enhancements every single week. Enhancements are coming out. They're the ones designing it. They're the ones testing it. So then they work with the coders to develop it. They code it, then they test it, and back and forth they go
Yeah.
until it's time to be deployed. They deploy it to the customers and they train the customers on how to use it. And then finally, they're still doing phone support on that thing that
But
they
they know it like
designed.
the back of their
Yep.
hand. Yeah.
And they
Interesting.
love it. So it caused a full change in the operations of our company because now these people that we paid 40 hours a day to do this are now, oh, 2 days a week I'm doing design, or 1 day a week I'm doing testing. So we had to add more staff to that team, just so that we could change the way that they worked. And that was about 8 or 9 years ago. And it was a game changer because now the people that we get on that team, I mean, I don't know any other company where the employees love their jobs so much. They'll say it like I'll send them texts on their anniversaries at the company and they're like, "The luckiest day of my life was when you said you wanted to hire me." Like they love their jobs that much because we added like diversity
Another layer to it.
to their day-to-day operations,
That's really
So
cool.
yeah.
When you think about if you were talking, if we were doing a keynote, right?
Yeah.
And you were talking to somebody who was interested in business ownership, because I think you have a unique perspective. Like I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of our people that are on the podcast are franchise owners. But at the end of the day, they're an independently owned and operated business. It's their business.
Yeah.
And so if you were talking to somebody, being that you've been through seeing your parents run it, having it be acquired, then you acquiring it and moving up the line. Are there any sort of things that you would tell somebody, some advice for someone that's getting into business ownership?
Yeah, I think there's like key, and it does come back to like your own personality too, but I think the keys are like connecting to people. I have a strong belief in not just connecting to my employees, but also connecting to customers. So when we were talking earlier, I do still believe in like going face to face with them. Obviously, you can't do that all the time like in the old days, but going face to face with people and establishing that relationship is so, so important in all businesses, I think. I believe in that. But I also think, you know, walking into a business that is already established, maybe not brand new, but it's established, trying not to make too much change too fast. Like making sure you first get to know all the things that are happening so that you're not just like, nope, you used to do it that way. Now we're going to do it my way. Like letting the people that are already there understand that you're not there, you're not going into, you know, take over and just tell them like your way was bad and my way's right, and like having that those two things for me were at the beginning of the change, like making sure I didn't just walk in and make everything be different, even though maybe deep in my heart I knew most everything needed to be different, right?
Right.
And then really kind of the last is making sure like listening is such a lost communication skill. And I'm not blaming it on social media or phones and stuff, but people are like learning to spend time, letting your people get to know you as a person, but also you them. And same with customers, like really having that be a strong part of communication. No, nobody, I don't believe anybody's great at communication. We all wish we were better. And so to me, the core of that being better at it is listening to people and making sure you're understanding before you kind of react to that. So, financially, like I kind of said earlier, doing all the things that feel right to you, like staying up with technology gets harder as you get older, like so then surrounding yourself with people that are really good at your weaknesses. Like I know that I'm not good at the accounting side of our company, the financial side. I know I'm not good at that. So I've always surrounded myself with really good CFOs. Even just, finding good computer programmers that are like diverse, able to kind of show you different things that maybe you didn't already know about. And then truly like having people that are like good with people. Like not everybody is good with people, and that's okay. But making sure you don't put them in a position where they're gonna be offending one of your customers or vice versa, like not able to handle a stress of a customer. So really just everything to me comes down to people and making sure you have the right people in the right spots. And you said it earlier really well, Dave, too. So, like making sure you're what
Right
is
people, right seat.
yep,
Yep.
loved it.
So I do have one quick question.
Uh-huh.
Is there any decision that you made in your business where when you were about to make the decision, it felt really risky at the time, but looking back, it was a foundational decision that you made for the business or for your success?
100%. And it really was related to um we were at this growth point where I was struggling finding the right leader for the biggest department in our company, which is that the one I described, like 2/3 of our company is the support that does all the other things. I was kind of rolling through the people trying to lead it, and it wasn't, none of it was working. And finally, a woman who was one of my best phone support people, we always were like, no, because she's so good at this part of her job. We don't want to move her into this leadership role because then who's going to do that? And so then I ended up saying, like, it's time. And so I moved her to the leadership role, reporting directly to me, overseeing that whole department. It was game changer because not only was she really good at the leadership side, she then surrounded herself with really good people. So it's hard to take people that are really good at operational parts of their job and see that they could be this leader that you're going to pluck from that and put them here.
Mhm.
That's tricky, but and it's risky because you just don't know if it's going to work out. You
Right.
really don't know. And like today, me getting ready to kind of think about retiring, the last 4 years, same thing. Finding the kind of younger people that have leadership qualities that match the culture of the company, but also that they want to be a leader. Like you don't
Yep.
just, like some of it is their own desires and some is, do they have what it takes? So yeah, I think that's probably the key moment. And that was like 20 years ago.
And so you mentioned the thought of possible retirement. So let's just talk exit strategy. At
Okay.
some point, I would imagine as you've been through business where you thought to yourself like, well, where am I? I'm not going anywhere.
Exactly what
At,
I said.
yeah, at some point you decide, oh, okay, so not only do I need to figure out an exit for me, but I also have to figure out an exit for the company
Yeah,
that
exactly.
makes sense in what we've built.
Yeah.
So, you know, oftentimes I talk with people and they say that thinking about the exit and working backwards is sometimes a great way to build a business, especially at the franchise level. So for you, at some point, maybe it was 10 years, 5 years, I'm not sure, the exit was there. You could see the door where you thought, okay, maybe I will retire. So how did you work backwards and kind of plan for that exit? You mentioned finding the right person for that
Hmm.
position, which I would imagine makes things a lot more comfortable if you do find
Yeah.
that person.
Yeah.
But realizing that bridge between I'm getting to a point where I'm going to turn this over and what happens after that, I can't necessarily worry about.
Exactly. That's a great way to say it because that is how I feel today is like, I'm going to work my tail off over these next 10 months to work with the future leaders, especially the future CEO, and take him with me to meet key people, like who I would call key people, and us together so that I can get him connected to the people that I feel strongly connected to so that they feel good about it. So that's one of my top priorities. And I've already done this step with the employees because that was first and foremost, like they needed to hear it from me, just them. And so I did that face to face a few weeks ago. But we've been working on this for about 3 years and establishing the not just a leader, but a group of leaders that as the company grows, we need more than just this leader to, like if as I exit, but there's so much growth potential in the company that there's another, like, there's a
Another
batch of
layer.
7 of them that we have been kind of grooming. And some of them, of course, are stronger at certain parts of leadership, and some are going to kind of remain more in the operation side of things just because that's where they are better. But it's been really kind of, now that I've announced it to the employees, I feel better because now it's out there. And then I've already told them who the next leader is
Successor
going to
is. Yep.
be, and they are excited about that too. So that makes me happy because then I feel like what you said, like I feel like when I am gone and now I've made the customers happy, I've been there 30 years. I've kind of felt like 30 years, that's when I finally was like, 30 years seems like enough.
Yeah.
And I'll be 63. And so it's like all those things seem like enough. But probably the key was our company is going to be 50 years old also this year. So having the company hit that milestone in an industry that is super unique, like in what we do, I think it's just been like all of it just feels right. But having my successor does make all of it feel even better because I know he's gonna take good care of them and the company. But I also don't want people keep asking me if I'm gonna stay on in some kind of like a role of,
Consultant.
and I'm like, no, because then they just keep on like, oh, maybe I should ask Michelle. Like, we had to sink or swim 25 years ago, and some of it is just letting them, if they need to sink a little, letting that happen because you learn so much more from the sinking.
I mean,
Um,
in the interview, you mentioned when you were sinking or swimming, you called your dad and
yeah,
said, "What
yeah,
do I do?"
yeah,
So you're the dad now.
yeah,
So while I think that the exit
yeah,
feels good,
yeah.
they're gonna call.
Yep.
You've been running the business for 30
Yeah,
years, and I think that it's important that you realize that the call is not necessarily that they need you.
yeah,
The call is that they want your input,
yeah,
right? And so
yeah.
never think about it like it's like, well, they want me to,
What if I change my number? No.
yeah. I was gonna say, my next question was gonna be to you is like, so what are you gonna do when they call you back?
Yeah.
But you touched on it, and I think it's important. Like everybody that runs business or life has that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
My wife calls her mom. I call my mom. You talk to whatever that might be. Like that's just your person. It's your sounding board.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't always like what it sounds like, what
Yeah.
they say, but at least you got to say what you wanted to. And I think for you and your business, I think there's a difference in, hey, let me get your 2 cents versus, hey, we'd like you to be a consultant. We don't want you to be a consultant, but you have to be the sounding board because you are what built Advantage.
Yeah.
Right. We do a little thing at the end. We're going to do a little rapid fire.
Okay.
I know a couple of these answers. So, best book for a leader right now.
Honestly, like the book I used 3 years ago and the one I'm going to use again this next year, my employees don't know it yet, is called The Fox, the Mole, the Horse, and the Boy. Have you ever heard of it?
I have heard of it. Yep.
It is not a leadership book. It's kind of a kid's book, but it's so good related to leadership messages. And
Good.
there's a new one out, so I just got the new one, and my employees don't know it yet, but that's going to be the next book that I'm going to force them to read.
Okay.
And then they have to do a kind of like an activity with it. So,
one piece of advice you wish someone would have given you when you were 25.
oh, let's see. I mean, I stayed pretty true to my heart, and I feel like that was coming from my parents. Like I feel like that they taught all of us how to like do what makes you happy. And so sticking true to my heart is the advice I've always stuck close to. I don't know if I have any regrets, so I don't know if I can come up with one I wish somebody would have said. Maybe like get your teeth straightened.
Fair. That's a fair one. Last one. What's one unexpected hobby that you love?
Oh, um, I like so many things. Like I guess right now, a little hobby that I really am starting to get into is like some woodworking with some epoxy.
Okay.
But the question I thought you were going to ask me is, what's the one thing that nobody knows about me?
Go
So
ahead.
that would be a better
Go ahead.
question.
Okay?
Because I
I'll
don't
ask.
really have any hobbies
Yep.
that.
I'll ask you that.
Okay.
I think you have more hobbies than you think.
Okay.
Uh,
What
last
are
question.
hobbies that you think that I have that are unusual? Let's hear them.
Well, I didn't say unusual,
Or
just
like,
unexpected.
yeah, let's hear them. What do you think I have that's
Oh,
unexpected?
we'll wait till we'll
Okay.
cut. We'll wait till we
Okay.
cut. Okay. Last question.
Okay.
What's one thing most people don't know about you?
So, 8 years ago, I was asked by the Secretary of Agriculture. His name is Sonny Perdue. He was at the time, 8 years ago, he was um, e- even before that, he was the governor of Georgia for 4 years. And then 4 more years, he was Democrat for a while, then Republican. Then he owned a ag business. So that's how I met him, was he needed a new computer system down in Georgia. Comes to my user conference and everybody is like, Michelle, Sonny Perdue's coming. And I'm like, I don't know who that is. And they all were like, Sonny Perdue, like the governor. They were saying all this stuff. And I'm like, awesome. So he gets there, he sits and listens to me speak at the beginning of my event and then stayed for the entire 3 days of our event. And by the last day, he's like, you are something different. You're something. And he wanted to buy our computer system and be partner with us, all the things. Turns out he didn't buy it because the other people in his company like didn't get on board. But also he then got asked to be this under Trump's first administration, he got asked to be the Secretary of Agriculture. And he's like, he was the last cabinet appointed. So it was like 12, I think, cabinets. He was the last one. And I text him, I was like, hey, congratulations. I heard you got the Secretary of Ag. And he's like, come be my deputy Secretary of Agriculture. And I was like, over here, like, what is it? Like,
Yeah.
Googling. And he's like, yeah, come be my second in command. And I go, what? And so then he said, I'm going to have somebody call you in a couple days and he's going to vet you. And I'm like, so through those 2 days, I didn't even know if I wanted to do this. I
Right.
didn't know anything about it. I had never had a desire to be in politics or anything related to this, but I called my siblings, called my sister, called my brother. And the one key person was my brother Bob says, you don't like it when people don't like you. So half the country is going to hate you no matter what. And you're not good at that, Michelle. You're going to like, and you had mentioned earlier, like when people tell you stuff you don't want to hear, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll be fine. He's like, you'll cry at the end of every day.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're not wrong. But anyway, I go through the vetting process and the owners of the company were like, if this is something that you've been wanting to do, I mean, this is a big deal, Michelle. Like, maybe you could. And I said, in my head, I could fly to DC on Sunday night and be like Monday through Thursday and fly home and run the company Thursday to Sunday. Like I had this in my head. So 2 days later, the guy calls me. Nick Ayers was the guy's name. And he's like, so have you always wanted to be in politics? And I'm like, no, but Sonny just asked me. And like, so we get to this point, not very far into it, where I say, first of all, I need you to know that I didn't vote for President Trump. And so then he's like this long silence on the other end. Okay. And I'm like, but I think that's why Sonny likes me, is that we could bring to the table of agriculture, we could bring two very diverse perspectives on the industry.
Yeah.
And so we kind of got past that. And so then we got to one of the next questions, which was, so do any of your siblings own any part of the business? You have you bought the business from your parents, or any of your siblings? I go, nope. And he's like, so then you have to sell your part of the business. And I go, well, I'm not doing that. And then he's like, well, you have to. And I was like, well, then this conversation's over. And so that's how it ended. And I tell Sonny, I go, hey, sorry, this is just a text. I go, I won't be able to do it because, the selling of the business. He goes, I knew they were going to say that, and I knew that's what you're going to say, but I thought I would give it a shot. I was
No, I think
like,
that says a lot about you, right? That says a lot about that, you're, it's interesting, right? Like we talked about, an interesting
Yeah.
thing no one knows about you, but it also goes back to the foundation of your business, right? There's an opportunity that comes up. And like you said, 10 opportunities a week to sell your business is a
Yeah.
lot,
It's so often.
but there's an opportunity that comes up that could, maybe it catapults you into a career that you've never thought of.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you have to go against what you've built
Yeah.
at Advantage, like, I'm out, no thanks.
Yep.
And I think that there's a lot to be said about that when you're very grounded in what you've built. And you have to, in coaching, we always talk about it like, you can't talk about it, you got to be about it.
Yeah.
And the things that you say at your keynote speaking things and your events and your conversations one-on-one with your employees, for you to do something like that would not reflect well on what you've said as far as what we're built on.
Yeah.
So that is a great thing, but and I think, obviously I think that not only that, but your employees probably appreciate that, and your fellow business owners
Yeah.
appreciate that more than anything. So
Yeah.
also, Michelle, thank you for giving us an inside look at your playbook, kind of how you've built, adapted, sustained success in Advantage. I think it's a different angle for the Franchise Frontier podcast to kind of talk about business ownership, culture, as you talked about it, and kind of, things that you've been through in growing this business. So congratulations on that.
Thanks, Dave.
If today's episode inspired you, or there's another fellow founder or someone who's interested in business, share this with them. Maybe it'll give them some insight on some things that they either need to help their business or grow their business. And if business ownership is calling your name, don't ignore it. The playbook is out there. The question is, are you willing to run it? Thanks for joining us on this episode, and we'll see you next time.